Hey, folks, and welcome. This is Inside the Leader's Mind, where what's in the way becomes the way. My name is David Suson. I want to welcome our guest today, Lynn Daniel. He started his business as a sole practitioner in 1989. And initially, growth was slow until he focused on customer experience in 2004. And after that point, growth accelerated. And suddenly he had a growing organization on his hands. And he decided a long time ago that he wanted to build a different kind of organization compared to most of those which he had experience in as either an employee or a consultant. And he really had two core guidelines that influenced him and his growing company. So we're going to jump into how he got there, how he started it, why and how he started, and, compared to corporate America and what those principles are. So please welcome Lynn Daniel.
David, thanks so much. I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, well, I was so excited to have you. I love, so I grew up in a family business. I love talking to entrepreneurs, people that have their own business. I love talking to big corporate, people too, but there's a soft spot in my heart for people that have their own business. So how did you get, I want to start right. I want to hear about your guidelines, but first I want to hear, how did you get to where you are today?
I grew up on a farm, so farmers by definition have to be entrepreneurial. But during the summertime, my brother and I had started a lawn mowing service because we didn't necessarily want to work on the farm all summer long. And it was more lucrative to do the lawn mowing service. So we started. I really paid for a lot of my graduate school education from the money from the lawn mowing service. So it sort of whetted an appetite in me for that, starting something, seeing it grow, seeing it successful, working with people, even though, you're mowing lawns on hot summer days in eastern North Carolina, it wasn't necessarily a lot of fun some days. But that's how I really got the entrepreneurial bug. I went to graduate business school, went to undergraduate, graduate business school, went into corporate America. Honestly, didn't care for it too much. And also I managed to get married to my wife of 48 years, and I started out with Eli Lilly, and at that time, they liked to move people around about every 2 years. So we'd been married for a year and a half, and lo and behold, I got the call to come to Indianapolis to interview for this job. And she said, well, if we're going to stay married, we need to rethink what we're going to do here. So that sort of led me into a different path. I went to a smaller public company, went to a small consulting firm after that, and then started my own firm in 89. I'd always said I wanted to start by the time I was 35. Well, I missed it by 4 years, but I still started it. And as you noted in your intro, it was a one horse operation for many years, but then it started to grow when we got into focused on CX. So that's a thumbnail sketch of how I got to where I am.
And you talk about CX, customer experience. What is your core focus with customer experience? What do you do?
Core focus, first of all, the market we focus on is B2B companies. So these are companies that sell and usually service big, complex, expensive pieces of equipment. Think Caterpillar equipment, Agco Fendt tractors, International Motors trucks, things like that. These are products that are used to serve other businesses. So, and there's also generally a long service tail because the customers that buy these things, if they're going to make money, they've got to keep them working. So it's really, really important to do that. So what we do is we've developed a very robust platform. With that platform, we're able to reach out to customers, randomly chosen customers, either by phone, text, email, or other means, and find out how the experience went. With the platform we have, we can share that information immediately. So if a customer's got an issue, bam, they will get a notification right then and there. Interestingly, David, we still do the bulk of our work by phone. And we can talk about that later if time allows. But I'm finding there is something about the phone and being able to engage a customer, engage someone in 3 minutes or so they'll tell you what's really going on, what they liked, what they didn't like. And that helps our clients understand, well, what do they got to do better the next time to improve.
And imagine that we actually talk to people on the phone. Right? Right? That's obviously been a huge change. What, in your company, you had mentioned two guidelines have influenced you and the growth of your company. What are those two core? I'm like dying to hear. What are those two core principles or guidelines that have influenced your own growth of your business?
Well, the first one really has three parts to it. We've always believed to be successful, we've got to make a difference for our clients. This doesn't just mean running a program that's not generating results. We want to really help our clients see a difference in how they approach their customers, because we know that those customers that are more loyal will spend more money, will do a variety of other good things for the company. Second thing, we've got to have some fun in the process. And I think that's a big criticism of mine of a lot of companies, is we've sort of lost the ability to have as much fun. Now, that doesn't mean we do crazy things or anything like that, but we tend to laugh a lot and we tend to cry a lot. We tend to work, I think, effectively as a team, but that's sort of anchored around this. We're trying to have some fun. Is it fun all the time? No, it's not, but it's fun most of the time. And the third thing to be successful, we've got to, or to support all this, we've got to be financially secure. So if we're going to do the other two things, we've got to do that. The second big thing that's important to me is we've got to have people that are always willing to act consistent with our company's values and mission. And one of those aspects of that is we have a real strong bent to action. That doesn't mean we go willy-nilly around things. We have a strong bent to action. So every new employee that comes into the company, I always have an interview, and one of the things I will say is I always want you to come to me to beg forgiveness and not ask permission. Because if you have to ask permission, we've got the wrong person. That's not the kind of person that fits well into our company. Those things I think have served, those two big buckets of thought I think have served our company very well over the years.
I love those are really cool. I want to bounce off the things you said. And we'll take one at a time. One is you talk about following kind of the mission vision. You didn't say culture. But I'm wondering, the first question related to that is, do you proactively define, here's how we operate, here's our mission, here's our vision, beyond said to me. And then the second is, so I don't forget, is with, and I already forgot. It'll come back to me. Sorry, let's go with the first one. I hate when that happens.
That? I was waiting for the second one. Would you repeat that, David?
Yeah, let's just do the first one is just, do you have mission, vision, culture, other than what you share, that it's like, no, this is kind of how we operate. This is kind of our MO within the organization, how we work with each other, how we treat each other, other than just, better to ask for forgiveness than permission. That was the second question.
Yeah,
but anyway.
we do. We're less formal about it than maybe some organizations, but it's still there. And I think people pretty quickly learn that this is the kind of culture we have, and this is who we are. We've had a couple of people that have come in the company over the years, and it just didn't work out. They were not comfortable with our culture. Unfortunately, we didn't catch that when we were in the hiring process, but it took in the case of one, about 3 months, in the case of another, about a year, to realize, hey, they just didn't like working here.
Was that because it was take action, get it done, or they didn't like that you like to have more fun?
No, I think it was the take action, get it done. That is, when I say to people, I'd rather you beg forgiveness than ask permission. Doing that puts people have to stop and think, okay, first of all, is he really serious? Is he going to just blast me out of the water if I make a decision and
Ask about that.
and screw something up? And I don't, I don't do that. I mean, that's not my modus operandi. Now, yes, if someone makes a mistake, we learn from the mistake. Okay, we try to learn from that mistake, but it's getting people to realize that you've got to take action, and I think the take action goes back to that first bullet I mentioned, which is this is one of the ways we make a real difference for our clients. We don't just sit around and wait for things to happen. We try to take action and figure out what do we need to do to change things.
Right. Right.
And we've had some instances with our clients where, um, you're not performing. You've got some areas in your company that are not performing. Now, we've got all this dashboard with all this information that we can drill down and see what's going on. And it would be just as easy to sort of sit there and wait for the client to contact us eventually, or maybe never, and say, wait, hey, we've got some issues here. But rather we try to be proactive. We try to say to that client, hey, you've got a problem in this location, or you're doing great in this location, because that's part of what making a difference for the client is, trying to help them understand what they need to do to reshape their organization so that things are different and better for the customers.
Yeah. I love that. You know, and you actually answered the question that I was going to ask, the one I'd forgotten about, because I was going to ask, that I love this whole idea of, and I'm just like with you, with my employees, I would rather they take action and ask forgiveness than permission, right? Get it done, give them the autonomy and the authority. It's crazy. My wife and I went somewhere and there was a problem, and it's like it took 5 levels of approval for, like, I think it was a $20 credit on a food bill. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, you've got to give people the authority to take, because from a customer service, it was a horrible experience. So you answered the question because you said they don't do it because I think they're afraid they're going to get zinged or zapped, right? And you said, but that's not you. That's not your MO. My question, maybe to expand on that first came to mind is, do you think that's the reason in other organizations, or any organization, that we say we want people to take action, but they don't? Do you think it's because the leadership, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth? What do you think it is? Why they don't? Why they don't just take action? Are they afraid of getting zinged, or are they just indecisive and they don't know what to do?
I think from my view, sort of my experience in earlier in my career, I think a lot of leaders are unwilling to trust their gut and to trust their people to do things. And this notion of being a manager, let me take the word manager out of being a leader, is you've got to have your finger on everything that's going on. One of the most difficult transitions for me when we started this approach on CX, we probably had maybe 5 employees. Okay. And I was chief cook and bottle washer, including took out the trash every night at the office. But as we grew, I learned that I was going to die young if I tried to keep my finger on everything. And that taught me that it taught me 2 things. One, I needed to bring in the right kind of people that I would feel comfortable in making those decisions, that they would make good decisions. And then I also needed to just let them go make those decisions, because if I tried to second guess, to wonder why they were doing this, then that sent the message, well, you really don't trust me at all anyway. And I can think about several conversations I had with this one person who's worked with us for 16 years. And she was really, really great person. And I learned from her early on, Lynn, leave me alone. I will take care of this. You don't have to worry. And that's a lesson I learned as the business was growing. Because, being a solo entrepreneur or someone with 5 employees or more, you're sort of directly involved in about everything, from
Yeah.
choosing what you're going to get for lunch to you name it. And I had to quit that. I just had to stop it.
But I think one of the best things, though, that I heard there is this individual you hired obviously had enough confidence in their ability to come to you and say, I got it. Leave me alone, in whatever language they use. Because I think, in my experience, I mean, I can probably count on on one hand, the number of employees I've had that have that level of confidence to come to me and just say, I got it. Yeah, they're good at their job, but are they confident enough to come to me and say, I got it? And I love that when they do. But that's an individual that is confident in their skill, but they also have a level of fearlessness to be able to come to you or myself, whatever, and say that. Do you agree? Thoughts on that?
Oh, I totally agree. In this particular case, was very very technical. Has to have the best mind for analyzing a process that we're going to make into software and thinking through what are all the ramifications. So she knew that's not my cup of tea. That's not me. And she knew that. And so she was confident enough to say, Lynn, just back off. She said nicely, not quite that brusque, but she basically said, just back off and let me do it. And that's something I think managers have to learn if you're going to be good leaders.
And to not argue with it, and to trust and faith. I look at, as you were talking, you look at some of these major corporations, right? The Googles, the Facebooks, the Eli Lillys of the world. None of them would be where they are if those founders had held on. There's no way they could have grown. And I think it's a mix of having a vision that you want to grow, or you fall into it, you stumble into it. But I think it's the other part is just what you said, and I think it's brilliant, is you have to learn to let go and trust.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's for me early on, that was a hard thing to learn. But I had to learn it.
What do you think, as you look at your own leadership ability? What do you think your greatest strength is in leadership? Especially as leading people, right? Let's focus on that.
I think the thing that there are 2 things I think I'm reasonably good at. One is, like I said, letting go. And a case in point is I hired a COO. He's been with us almost 10 years now. And that was a huge transition because I was and still am to a degree face of the company. And so we had to work things out so that I could get more comfortable with turning more and more over to him. So that was the process for me. That was another transition point where I had to learn to give over some of the customer contact duties, other duties to Doug, which he's a fabulous leader, and he did that very well, continues to do it very well. And I think the other thing, I believe I'm a fairly decent listener, although my wife may not say that sometimes. But I think that's part and parcel of being married for as long as I have been. But anyway, I think those are two things, and maybe the strongest is just having the ability to sort of let go.
As you look at your strengths, and I'm sure if you've met executives, business owners, etc., what what's probably your biggest advice you would give? And I know this is a weird question, but I'm not talking about junior up and coming. As you look at other leaders, because you've done well, it seems like you have longevity with your employees. What advice would you give to other leaders that are on par with you or even bigger companies or organizations? If you have an opinion on that.
Yes, I do. I think one of the first things they need to do is be very careful about who you hire. It's not just anymore a matter of hiring people with the skill set you need. Yes, you need that. But you got to have people that mesh with your company's culture and your company's values. And I think that's one thing that gets short shrift in a lot of the hiring processes that I see. I think the second thing I would say to a lot of managers is they need to get the heck away from their office sometimes, or more often than they do. There is nothing like walking around and seeing what's going on to better understand how you need to change the organization. Years ago, give you a simple example. I won't go into the client or the details of the client, but they were trying to serve a new market, and the new market was smaller equipment, and as opposed to the big stuff that they traditionally served. And they were trying to figure out, we're not getting a lot of service revenue out of these smaller pieces of equipment. Now, part of it, that was the inherent issue, because the smaller stuff, a lot of self-repair can be done. But the other part of it is I went out to the back to three of their locations with my camera and took pictures. And I said, this is what your smaller customers, the customers buying the smaller equipment, see when they come into your back gate. Now, you got to keep in mind that customer was probably on a 2-ton truck with a trailer and maybe a piece of equipment. And they come in and they don't know where to go because the signage was not there, or the signage was such that it was hard to understand. So people say, well, why does that matter? Well, the traditional customer they served, they had people driving big lowboys, and they all knew where to go. It was like a secret society, you know. Yeah, I know which way to go if I pull into the back 2 acres. I know where to go. But the other people did not. And lots of times I see senior executives that just need to get out and walk around and sort of put themselves into the shoes of the customer and literally walk through or drive through their organizations as their customers would experience the organization. It's it's not quite mystery shopping, but it's a little bit like that, because, and it's not what is that, undercover boss or something.
Undercover boss, yeah.
But it's just walking around and looking and thinking, because the organizations I work with, and I've worked with over the years, they get into a pattern of doing things, and they keep doing those things, no matter what. One client, they had a entry level to a parts department pickup, and it had a riser, which had way in the past had black and yellow warning tape so that people didn't trip over it. It had worn away, and for years it had been like that. And people got accustomed to it. They lived with it until one day a customer came in to pick up some parts and dropped a box of parts when he tripped over the riser in the door. So that's why I say just walking around sometimes gives you an idea of what's going on. It also gives you a really good idea of culture. Particularly, when I walk into a location and nobody's smiling, that's a problem. Or nobody acknowledges me. They don't bother to raise their eyes and look up. They're down doing this. And that's why I think it's so important for senior leaders to get out and see how their customers experience the business that they're delivering to them.
About I don't want to say excuse. What about the reason? Look, I'm too busy to do that.
Yeah, it's what I hear all the time, and I've got several really good. Well, they're now good friends, but senior leaders and CEOs of some rather large organizations, and a couple in particular I can think of. They make it a habit, a practice of actually scheduling time to go out and see what's going on. They put it on their calendar and they're out of the office and everybody knows it.
I think the bigger key, not the bigger key, but a key to that is what is the what are we trying to achieve, right? What's our longer term objective? And is it better, more clients, better customer experience, better employee experience, like whatever it is. And if we look at the bigger picture and we say, where does that rank in that process? And we realize, and I think people, they diminish what the impact is and they don't see what you're talking about. And they go, well, that's not a big deal. It is a huge deal because that's how you get repeat clientele. That's how you get a good word of mouth today with social media. And I think I'm curious. I'd rather turn this as a question, not just a statement. If that's kind of your perspective on this, that it is a big deal and it does make an impact on the organization.
It is a big deal. It makes a huge impact on the organization. I'm still go back to that example of that customer tripping over that thing. Now that could have resulted in a lawsuit.
Okay. Yeah.
Could result in a lawsuit. But one of the things they started a process improvement effort, really disciplined. So even little things, seemingly little things like that tape, that safety tape on that riser, or painting something in the yard that was really rusty and dirty looking. What it does, David, it sends a message to employees that even these seemingly little things matter to the organization, and therefore they probably matter to the customer. Because let's face it, if you you have someone to come fix your pump or whatever in your house or pool or whatever you may have, and they drive up on a beaten up old truck, that says something to you when you see it. And that's the same thing with the clients that I'm working with. It's how those customers see your physical presence, how they see people interact with them. Do they smile? Do they seem to care? Do I trust them to act in my best interest, which is a huge question? Or are they just trying to siphon all the bucks out of my pocketbook that they can.
Right.
But do they really care about what I need to get done for my customers? And when you can get that culture established in an organization, it's amazing what I see happening. We've got several that have really done a fabulous job at getting that kind of culture established. And so that, you see them not only do they have high CX scores, but by the way, their financial performance is very good.
And ultimately, that's what people are looking for, right?
That's what people are
That
looking.
one impacts the other, and that there's a direct correlation, right? Quality of service, and revenue, absolutely. And and I want to touch just briefly on the kind of management by walking around. The other thing that does, I believe, is it sends a message. Talk about culture. It sends a message to your own employees that, hey, I care.
Yes.
And we want to do the right thing, not only for the client, but really for you. We're noticing and we want to make it better, et cetera. And I think that's key.
Yes, I
Yeah.
totally agree. Because just when the boss, CEO, whoever it may be, walks around and starts talking to people, employees, it's amazing, one, what they learn and what the grapevine chatter that happens among the organization. Um, and I can think of another instance where we got a new CEO in. The other one um, was less engaged than I would like to have seen. This new one, though, came in, and he was one of those who believed he needed to schedule time to get out, and he did it. And when he first started doing it, it was a little bit of a shocker to people. But after a while, they realized, well, he's serious about this. He's asking good questions. He's listening. He's approachable. We can talk to him, have coffee with him. And so that's the kind of thing that I think a lot more leaders need to do.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Um, we have time for a couple quick questions here.
Sure.
One is, I want you to think about I'm just curious, your own leadership, not someone else, not what other people should do. But as you look at your own, I'm a big believer in Kaizen and Deming and, continual improvement and looking at in the mirror as a leader and saying, where do I know I need to get better? And even at this stage, you've been doing this a number of years. What's an area you look at personally and say, look, as a leader, I know need to get better at this.
Hmm. I think one of the things I've got to learn to do better is just understanding more how we market ourselves this day and age, because it's very different from years ago when I first got started. We have digital, all kinds of digital means. We got social media, we've got all kinds of things that are out there. And I think for me, trying to understand the people that are out there that might be interested, what do I need to change about me that would help me be more effective in learning that process? That's really one thing that's been a real source of frustration for me, because there aren't any easy, you know, what should media for dummies or something like that, that's worth a darn. And in fact, I'm working on a book right now, and I'm talking about how this whole marketing thing has changed since the '80s when I got out of business school, and it's changed dramatically in how we do things.
Yeah, it is a challenge to figure it out because it moves fast. That's where almost you get to the point where you just hire people that already know it, and not you don't need to be the expert. Say, and that's the first thought.
I think that's probably what I do now, is just hire somebody and say, "Tell me what I need to do."
Right, right, yeah. I want to close with one last question here, and that question is this: What is a question you wish people would ask you, but they don't? But you would love to be able to tell them about something. And I don't necessarily mean myself in this interview podcast, but like just in general, you look at it and you go, man, people always ask me these kind of questions, but man, I wish they would ask me this.
Man, that's a hard one. I wish they would ask me to talk more about some of the really positive things I have seen in the interactions between customers and providers. You know, we always talk about where we screw up. That's just who we are. We had to learn to talk about the downside of things to keep from getting eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. Well, that's still hardwired into us. And we do that. But we never talk about, and people ask me about, Lynn, can you give me some examples of a really fine situation? One of our clients, and I can talk about this with no problem, is a company called AGCO. They make Fendt tractors and Gleaner combines, a bunch of other things. Fendt introduced a tractor from Germany several years ago, and it was a really advanced tractor. We talked to this farmer who said that he had bought 3 already, and he thought he was responsible for selling another 6 in the county. The guy was proudful. I mean, really proud of this tractor. In fact, so much so that he parked them out front of his house to let the neighbors know that he had fence on his farm. And why? Because he felt like, one, he felt it was a fantastic product. Okay, that's one thing. But people who have a good experience either with the product or the service, they almost co-brand themselves with that product or service when they go tell somebody else. And that's what he was doing. And he was proud of it. He went on for 10 minutes in this phone interview. We pulled it down. We record all our phone calls, and we pulled it down and listened to it. And I couldn't believe it.
He's like a raving fan.
An absolutely raving fan. And let me tell you,
that's the best. That's the best.
And farmers are not normally raving fans about much of anything.
Yeah, those stories are, and then digging in, which we don't have time to do here, but digging into the why behind that. I'm actually thinking about doing another podcast where I'm able to kind of follow up and dig in on some of these stories because I love customer experience. I speak on that too. And it's, God, there's so much there. And I think so many people, we overcomplicate.
Yes.
And we don't, and we don't copy what's working. That's the amazing thing is you look at these stories and you learn about it and all someone has to do. I mean, it's simple, but not easy. But it's like, hey, this is what they do. Let's copy what they do. And it's not only about rock solid product because sometimes it's not the best products. No. It's the best organization, the best people, the best culture. No. So, yeah, I want to wrap here before we say goodbye. If people want to learn more about you, they want to learn about your company, they want to get in touch with you or the book at some point when that's done. What is the best way for people to get in touch with you, reach you? Sure. Etc.
Our website is www.thedanielgroup, THEDanielgroup.com.
There's no S in that, DANIELS. Okay.
And then my email address is Lynn Daniel, LYNNDANIEL @thedanielgroup.com.
Easy peasy. And we'll put that in the show notes if you missed that. Lynn, it has been such a pleasure. And what I loved about you having it as guest is how you weave in these stories. And I really think it's so impactful when you share that way for people to make the connection. Yep. So I really appreciate you being with me today. And thank you so much for joining me today.
David, thanks so much. It was my great pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that is Inside the Leader's Mind. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join us on the next session. Bye.